Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be here to talk about a topic that is still controversial and troubling, the events of January 8, 2023, the mass convictions by the Supreme Federal Court, and what that means for our democracy, or what's left of it. I'll get straight to the point. What's happening is a disgrace, a tyranny disguised as justice, and if we don't open our eyes, we're going to sink into a judicial dictatorship that not even a B-movie could portray. Let's start from the beginning. What happened on January 8th? A group of Brazilians, dissatisfied with the results of the 2022 elections, took to the streets in Brasilia. Some, in an uncontrollable impulse, stormed the Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace. They broke windows, spray-painted walls, damaged furniture. Is that a crime? Obviously. Property damage, public disorder, all of it is covered in the Penal Code. But to call this a coup attempt? That's a legal fallacy, a grotesque distortion of the law serving political interests. Article 359M of the Penal Code, created in 2021, defines a coup attempt as trying to overthrow, through violence or serious threat, the legitimately constituted government. So then, where was the violence? Where was the serious threat? No weapons were found. No clear leadership was identified. There were no hostages, no control over institutions, and the protesters left within a few hours. One of the invaders, who identified herself as left-wing, shouted in a video, "Mission given, mission accomplished." Whose mission, exactly? No one explains. What is known is that the buildings were vacated quickly, proving that the rule of law was never really at risk. A real coup requires tanks, generals, coordination. Not an unarmed group that runs at the first sign of police. This is an impossible crime. And what we see is a manufactured narrative to justify the arrest of Jair Bolsonaro. Mark my words, this is yet another one of my predictions. The Supreme Court cannot tolerate any deviation when it comes to the events of January 8th. This is the exact maneuver to convict Jair Bolsonaro, maintain the narrative of unbreakable voting machines, and sink Brazil into tyranny. The little tyrants from the Club of Untouchables and Robes fabricated this farce and sentenced thousands of people, some to 17 years in prison. 17 years. Why? Because the Supreme Court decided to ignore the facts and disregard the law. There was no structure for a takeover of power, nor any coordinated plan. There was only a protest that got out of control. Convicting this as a coup violates the principle of criminal law specificity. No one can be punished for a crime they didn't commit in a way that is clear and established by law. But the Supreme Court stopped caring about legality a long time ago. The goal is clear, to make an example out of anyone who dares to disagree with the current regime. And what about how the cases are handled? It's a spectacle of arbitrariness. The most blatant absurdity is the elimination of the right to a double degree of jurisdiction, a right guaranteed by the Constitution. Every Brazilian has the right to a fair trial and to appeal the decision, but the defendants from January 8th, ordinary citizens, were taken directly to the Supreme Court with no chance to appeal. The justification? A supposed connection with people who have privileged legal standing, who haven't even been convicted yet. A laughable excuse. Every citizen has the right to have their actions considered individually and to a full defense. Instead, the Supreme Court handed down mass convictions as if everyone was part of a criminal organization or a coup plotter. I feel a deep disgust, a visceral revulsion, seeing this circus of horrors set up at the heart of the nation. What we are witnessing is an unprecedented institutional tragedy, a global embarrassment that will mark our history as a grotesque example of tyranny disguised as justice. The protagonists of this macabre theater, drunk on absolute power, don't realize that their names are already being etched into the pages of infamy, not as heroes, but as authoritarian aberrations, caricatures of robed despots. Their children and grandchildren will inherit not honor, but shame, the burden of vile acts committed by their ancestors. And their spirits, scarred by the pain they inflicted on the innocent, will wander in limbo, dragged down by the moral mire of their own choices. This is not justice, it is a personal agenda of domination, ego, and revenge. That's what this banana republic has become, a laboratory of authoritarianism with a democratic veneer. And even worse, they condemned the soldiers before even identifying who the general was. This violates the principle of in dubio pro reo. When in doubt, the defendant should be acquitted. In today's Brazil, doubt weighs against the defendant. The sentences? An atrocity. Most of those convicted did things like take selfies, enter public buildings, scribble on a statue with lipstick, or simply be present nearby. And the federal police? The most despicable face of this rotten system. They have become obedient servants of the regime, active accomplices in the lie. They deceived peaceful citizens, herding them like cattle onto buses under the pretense of legality, only to deliver them to humiliation and imprisonment, without defense or dignity. They betrayed the people they were supposed to protect, selling their honor for scraps of prestige and power. They are uniformed traitors, infamous with their official badges. And what about the average Brazilian? The one who stays silent, adapts, and sells out for very little. The famous Jaitinho has become a national religion. A cult of cleverness, convenience, and cowardice disguised as cordiality. A people who smile on the outside, but betray on the inside. Warm in appearance, but indifferent at heart. Hypocrisy is the true national identity, and anyone who points it out is attacked for stating the obvious. Brazil has become a portrait of its own moral misery. Take the case of Deborah Santos. She scribbled on a statue with lipstick and was sentenced to 17 years in prison. The crime of property damage carries a maximum sentence of 6 months. Turning that into almost 2 decades behind bars is blatant abuse. It's about criminalizing protest to instill fear and shape dissent. These people are not terrorists. They are fathers, mothers, grandparents, and workers thrown into a perverse machine. Their young children suffer from their absence, while the regime tightens the noose. Brazil has become a state that suffocates slowly, like the cruelest regimes in history, one by one, with the coldness of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. And the population, indifferent, only reacts when it is affected. But this regime spares no one. It keeps moving forward, and who is running this machine? Alexander de Moraes, the conductor of the authoritarian symphony. He is, at the same time, the victim, the investigator, and the judge. A mockery of the Constitution and the Code of Criminal Procedure. How can anyone be impartial when they are an interested party? Moraes orders preventive arrests, freezes bank accounts, not just of the alleged suspects, but also of their family members, a totally criminal and totalitarian aberration, censors social media, and systematically ignores requests for recusal. Even Minister André Mendonça, in 2024, expressed concern about these abuses, and nothing happened. Moraes acts like a monarch, a robed despot who believes his pen is above the law. And what about the threats? Ladies and gentlemen, open your eyes. Moraes threatened to arrest the wives and daughters of those under investigation, like in the case of Mauro Cid. This isn't justice, it's judicial blackmail, the kind of thing you see in third-rate dictatorships. Whistleblowers like Cid aren't after the truth, they're after deals. They're opportunists, trading accusations for favors like rats fleeing a sinking ship. These plea bargains, full of ulterior motives, are used to convict without evidence, while the truth rots behind the scenes. What we're seeing is a state apparatus that destroys families in the name of institutional stability. Freedom is hanging by a thread, and the public's silence is complicit in this erosion. As for the infamous coup draft, it's a legal fiction, a document that was never signed, never executed, never made public. Not even the defendant's lawyers had access to it. Convicting someone over a hypothetical draft is as absurd as arresting a screenwriter for a movie that was never filmed. This draft is a straw man, created to justify persecution. The Supreme Court claims that all 3 branches of government were paralyzed. So what? Has a temporary shutdown now become a coup? In 2018, the trucker strike brought the entire country to a halt. Highways were blocked, supply chains collapsed, cities came to a standstill. No one dared to call that an attempt to overthrow the constitutional order. Selective hypocrisy is the trademark of this court, which has traded the scales of justice for the sword of repression. If there were even a minimum of institutional decency, the security forces would have been deployed in time and there would have been no invasion, no destruction, nothing. But everything suggests that it was allowed to happen, maybe even orchestrated, with infiltrators dressed in green and yellow to create the chaos needed for a convenient narrative. It's an old dirty tactic of authoritarian regimes: provoke chaos, seize the pretext, and the people, unsuspecting and naive, fell right into the trap that was set. Want to take on a regime that's been entrenched for decades? Start by studying. Read, observe. Understand how the system works. Thinking you can topple a well-established power structure with good intentions, a national team jersey, and a WhatsApp post is pure fantasy. That's not a revolution, it's a carnival. And if you keep insisting on that illusion, you'd be better off just watching Globo. At least there, no one expects you to use your brain. Long live the farce, and always blame the government, as if the theater weren't packed with accomplices in the audience. A snowstorm shuts down the U.S. Congress for days. And yet, no one accuses anyone of insurrection. This rhetoric serves one purpose: to turn opponents into criminals. Bolsonarista has become a pejorative label, a stigma. Like the Star of David forced on Jews, it doesn't matter what you've done, but what you think. It's ideological repression. It's totalitarianism. The Supreme Court, whose role should be to protect the Constitution, has turned into a prosecuting body. The separation of powers has been dissolved. Impartiality, the sacred principle of the judiciary, has been sacrificed for political convenience. Even the Minister of Defense, Jose Muccio, stated in February 2025 that there are innocent people in prison. If even the government acknowledges this, what explains the inaction? The scandal has already crossed borders. U.S. Senator Marco Rubio denounced the censorship imposed by the Supreme Court on citizens of Zimbabwe, including owners of digital platforms. This is no longer just a national problem. It's an international embarrassment. Censorship, in turn, is advancing at an alarming rate. The Supreme Court wants to silence social media. Soon, the only way to access real information will be through a VPN. That's already the case with Rumble, Alan dos Santos, Rodrigo Constantino, all banned from Brazil. The big tech companies, acting cowardly, obey the Supreme Court without hesitation. They prefer profit over freedom. Is this the country we want to leave to our children? A place where the truth is criminalized and justice has become a tool of oppression? And behind all of this, there's a dark, globalist agenda that goes beyond national interests. Today we won't get into that, but the path has already been set. If we don't react, the Supreme Court will consolidate a judicial dictatorship, and democracy will become nothing more than a memory, just like the talk about possible American sanctions against Marais, such as the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. This is more about geopolitical theater than a real pursuit of justice. The IEEPA gives the U.S. president broad powers in the event of a national emergency. Trump and Rubio see the Starlink case, where Marais froze X's assets, as a political opportunity to defend Elon Musk, attack Lula, and please conservative voters. But the truth is that sanctions through the IEEPA are unlikely. Applying it would seem arbitrary, since it gives the American president discretion in its enforcement. So the Magnitsky Act, which is more specific, seems like a more viable path, since it examines the evidence and proof presented and can punish the scoundrel on solid grounds. It takes a little longer, but it will come. In the end, it's a battle of egos. Marais is a tyrant, but Rubio and Trump aren't saviors. They're just politicians playing to their audiences, and if they can, they'll show who's boss. So, even this doesn't change anything in Brazil. Those affected will just walk around with a little suitcase of cash and 5 bodyguards when they go shopping at luxury malls in Brazil, and for them, the only thing is they won't be able to visit Disney, but otherwise, life and tyranny go on. So, my friends, it's great to see the little tyrant get screwed, but that doesn't save Brazil. The real fight happens through social organization, not by venting randomly on social media. I'm here doing my part. And you? Are you going to keep waiting like most people, just sitting there, inert, watching the country rot from the inside? Just a heads up, as soon as my American visa is approved, I'm leaving. But until then, I'll keep speaking out, stirring things up, and most importantly, trying to spark some resistance. If you want to change something, start now. Get together with people you trust, either in person or online. Discuss ideas, set goals. Small, well-coordinated actions are worth more than millions of outraged people staying silent. Set medium and long-term objectives. Identify resources. Map out safe places for meetings. Start small, but with a clear sense of purpose. There's no secret to it. Every war starts with tests, with probing, with small strategic battles. And don't kid yourself, most people will ignore you, mock you, or even report you, but keep going. If 2 or 3 people come together with focus, that's already the start of an action cell. Keep your general goals legal and broad, but treat your strategy with absolute secrecy. Trust is gold. Look into the background and posts of anyone who wants to get involved in councils or local groups. Don't accept just anyone. Infiltrators, traitors, and cowards are everywhere. Be selective, be tough. A lot can be done, but only by those who truly want it. Institutional politics won't change anything. It's just a parasite that feeds off the energy of popular movements. The only force capable of turning things around is autonomous, decentralized, and invisible organization. Everything else is just theater. What's the way out of this legal limbo? The right thing would be to try the defendants from January 8th in the lower courts, with due process, individualized charges, and proportional sentences. The Senate should exercise its prerogatives and open proceedings for abuse of authority. But we know that most senators have been tamed, with cases in the hands of the Supreme Court itself. It's up to civil society to rise up, get organized, and prepare for recession, censorship, and authoritarian impositions, including those related to public health. Get informed about mRNA technology. Don't be a clueless guinea pig. Create information networks. Use a VPN. Strengthen local ties. Polarization is a trap set by the system. Divided, we are easy prey. United, we are strong. The individual is sovereign, capable of self-management, of living with mutual respect and shared values. The Brazilian state, that parasite that devours taxes and freedoms, is not our protector, it is our executioner. The Brazil they sell us is just a fantasy used to justify abuses. We don't want to save this rotten system. We want to save people, to guarantee dignity, education, health, and freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, the future is in our hands. Do not normalize this tyranny. React, question, resist. Democracy is built with free voices, never with imposed silence. See you next time.